I still remember the exact sentence. Not because it was loud, not because it was dramatic, but because of how casually it was said, like a fact that didn't even need to be explained. People like you don't file seven-figure claims. This is probably a mistake. Or worse. The man across the desk didn't even look up when he said it. He just leaned back in his chair, tapped his pen against a polished walnut surface, and sighed like I was wasting his Friday afternoon. I sat there perfectly still, not frozen composed. The kind of stillness you learn after years of being underestimated, talked over, smiled at instead of listened to. The kind of stillness that says, I've survived rooms colder than this. The office was on the 32nd floor of a glass tower downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows, abstract art. No one ever looked at air that smelled faintly of expensive coffee and cheap confidence. I was dressed simply, tailored navy blazer, flat shoes, hair pulled back. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed money, apparently nothing that screamed belonging. Behind him, I noticed a young employee pretending to organize files, her phone angled just slightly wrong. I knew that angle. I'd seen it before. Someone thought this was going to be entertainment. I cleared my throat. I've provided all the documentation. Property records assessments, contractor estimates, everything requested. He finally looked at me then. Really looked. His eyes flicked over my face, my hands, my posture, not searching for truth but for confirmation of a story he'd already written. Documentation can be fabricated, he said. Fraud's pretty common after natural disasters. I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. I'd spent my life learning patterns. Markets have them. Systems have them. People definitely have them. And this man, he was following one down to the letter. The storm had destroyed half the coastline where my property sat. Roof damage, structural flooding, a loss north of $1 million verified by 3 independent firms. On paper, it was boringly legitimate. But paper only matters if the person holding it believes you deserve it. He asked questions without waiting for answers, interrupted himself to check his watch. At one point, he slid my folder aside like it was already irrelevant. You understand? He said, lowering his voice into something he probably thought was empathetic. We usually see claims like yours from different profiles. Different profiles. I let the silence stretch. I could feel the room shifting not toward me, but away from him. Phones were out now. I could hear faint notification pings, someone's live stream count climbing. He noticed it too, his jaw tightening, but pride kept him moving forward. Honestly, he added, you might have better luck with legal aid or a community resource center. They're more equipped for situations like this. That one landed, not sharp heavy. It wasn't just a denial anymore. It was a relocation. A quiet attempt to move me out of his world and into a smaller one he'd already decided I belonged in. I thought about correcting him, about listing my credentials, about explaining how wrong he was. I didn't. Because there's a moment, if you've ever truly held power, where you realize the most dangerous thing you can do is let someone finish revealing themselves. So I waited. He stood up, signaling the end. We're closing in a few minutes. I'm going to have to ask you to gather your things. Security was already on the way. I could hear footsteps outside the glass wall. The building was winding down, lights dimming in sequence like a slow exhale. I folded my hands in my lap. Before I go, I said calmly, may I make one phone call? He shrugged. Make it quick. I took out my phone. The room barely paid attention until I spoke the name. Hi, Daniel, it's me. Something shifted, not dramatically, just enough. I continued. I'm downstairs at your subsidiary's claims office. Yes, that one. Behind him, a woman stepped out of a corner office. Older, sharper eyes. She'd been watching longer than I realized. Security arrived. One guard stepped forward. The other hung back, studying my face with a furrowed brow, like a memory trying to surface. I raised one finger to pause them still on the call. Daniel, I said evenly, would you mind explaining this situation to the regional director? She's right here. The color drained from the woman's face as she took the phone. She listened for maybe 5 seconds, then 10. Her posture changed completely. Yes, sir, she said, voice tight. Of course, right away. When she handed the phone back, she didn't meet my eyes. The room had gone quiet in that specific way rooms do when reality starts moving faster than denial. The younger guard whispered, Ma'am, weren't you on the cover of... Enough, the first man snapped, but it was too late. Phones were no longer subtle. The man behind the desk looked confused now, then nervous, then afraid. That's not possible, he said weakly. You didn't look like what I asked. That was the moment. The moment when every assumption he'd made lined up in front of him and demanded an explanation he didn't have the courage to give. I stood slowly, not triumphantly, not angrily, just finished. I didn't come here to expose anyone, I said. I came because my home was damaged and I needed help. I turned to the woman who now looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her. I'd like a full review of his claim decisions. 5 years, broken down by demographic. I want the data in the boardroom in 10 minutes. She nodded without hesitation. The man behind the desk tried to speak. Nothing came out. As I walked toward the elevator, the second guard, the one who'd recognized me, held the door open. His voice was quiet. I'm sorry you were treated like that. I smiled at him. A real one. Thank you for seeing me. The elevator doors closed softly. No applause, no final words, just silence. Later, much later, people would talk about consequences, about firings, about reforms and policies and statements written by lawyers. But that's not what stayed with me. What stayed with me was the look on that man's face, not when he realized who I was, but when he realized who he'd been. Because money didn't change how he treated me. Information did. And that's the part we don't like to talk about. So I'll ask you, do you think people change when they find out who you really are? Or do they just reveal who they've been all along? Tell me what you think. I'm listening.